Welcome to Spicer & Company. I'm Shawn Spicer.
And I'm Lindsay Keith. Well, as we've all been witnessing, economies around the world are hurting. And while some countries are cautiously beginning to reopen, many of us realize it's not going to be the same. And I mean, let's be honest, we don't know how long it's going to take for our economy and for others to recover. One thing we do know, however, is where this all started.
That's right. China. They lied. It's not a shocker. But with more than 250,000 people that now have been confirmed dead by COVID-19, how are we going to hold them accountable? Senator Tom Cotton has been a very vocal critic of the communist regime, and he's about to join us. What does he think America should do? And just as importantly, don't you think the international community should start banding together and look for some kind of retribution? We're going to break this down with the former chief of staff of the National Security Council. And let's not forget our friends on the other side of the aisle, the Democrats. I also want to know why their focus has been on President Trump and not on China. But before we get to all of that, let's rewind from the beginning. It was January when Senator Tom Cotton was the first senator to warn the Trump administration about both coronavirus and China's role in it. He urged the administration to shut down travel from China and even urged U.S. authorities to investigate the origins of the virus. Based on China's long history of deceit, Senator Cotton urged an investigation into the possible role that, get this, China's level 4 super lab located in Wuhan might have had some kind of a role. And while the media immediately dismissed his concerns, guess what? Now, sources in the intelligence community say he may have been onto something. Take a listen to what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says.
These are not the first times that we've had a world exposed to viruses as a result of failures in a Chinese lab. And so while the intelligence committee continues to do its work, they should continue to do that and verify so that we are certain. I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
Well, joining us now is the man that has been that leading voice holding China accountable, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Senator, welcome.
Thank you, Shawn. Good to be on with you.
Thanks. Senator, back in December, the Chinese sent a delegation here to do some trade work. Then they went to Davos to the World Economic Forum. They knew all along that this virus had started to break out, and they said nothing. Isn't that the big, I mean, that should be an outrage for every single American to realize how misleading and how deceitful they have been.
Shawn, that's right. No matter what the origins of this virus were, China's response to it was criminally negligent. So they knew probably by early December, mid-December at the very latest, that this virus was both highly contagious and very deadly for some people. Yet they continued to tell the world and pressure the WHO to say that it was not transmissible between humans. They continued to say that it was under control, and they continued to allow air travel from mainland China to the rest of the world. For instance, 22,000 people were coming from mainland China every single day to America in December and in January. All the while China knew exactly how devastating this virus could have been. For that alone, they have to be held accountable.
So, Senator, here's the thing. How do we balance the trade tensions that we have, not escalating military tensions, while at the same time recognizing that they own $1.2 trillion worth of our debt? And frankly, at a moment in which we need it, they're producing needed drugs and all this PPE that we need to protect our frontline workers. How do we go about holding them accountable, knowing everything that you've just laid out?
Well, Shawn, a lot of those tensions are the result of Chinese aggression or Chinese efforts against American citizens. So it's true that unfortunately China has leverage over the entire world right now because they have so much market share in things like basic drugs or medical equipment. That's a reminder why in the long term we cannot allow this situation to continue. We have to bring back more of that manufacturing, not only in drugs and medical equipment, but other critical industries like telecommunications or other high-tech fields. We also have to make sure that we continue to find or search for the origins of this virus and that we hold China accountable, whether it's opening up American courts to those who were harmed by this virus so they can seek redress from China, or ensuring that the World Health Organization actually acts for world health and not for world politics, or any number of other measures that are necessary to check Chinese ambitions that have been long-standing and all directed towards replacing the United States as the world's preeminent power.
You know, Senator, one other area that you've been really outspoken in is making sure that people understand how many Chinese students are coming to our colleges and universities. Let me put a chart up for the audience that since 2008, the number of students coming from China to the United States has gone from 98,235 in 2008 to 369,548 last year. That's a 3.5-fold growth over the last 10 years. You've been on the forefront of making sure people understand why this is a concern. Can you break it down for us?
Shawn, the FBI for years has been warning about the danger of Chinese espionage in high-tech fields, cutting-edge scientific and technological fields, especially at the graduate and the postgraduate level. So Chinese students who come here and study basic sciences at the undergraduate level, or certainly if they study the humanities or social sciences, not much of a threat. But to have graduate students or PhD postdocs working in our most sensitive laboratories, many of which are often funded by the Department of Defense or the intelligence community or the Department of Energy, poses a clear risk to our national security. Many of these students are either affiliated with or influenced and pressured by the Chinese Communist Party. That all is in addition to the fact that we are training a generation of Chinese to go back home and to continue fueling the Chinese Communist Party's ambitions to replace us as the world's strongest economic and military superpower. That's why it has to stop. We can't continue at the graduate and postgraduate level in these scientific and technological fields to give out student visas to Chinese nationals.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a no-brainer. We're basically enabling them to do this. We're letting them come over, do this, learn, and then steal our intellectual property and go back. But here's the other question I have for you, Senator. You've been out on the forefront of this. A lot of other senators on the Republican side. Why have your colleagues on the Democratic side not been as outraged about what China is doing and instead focused their blame on President Trump? Is it purely politics?
I think a lot of it is politics, Shawn. I mean, Trump derangement syndrome has a guiding principle, and that guiding principle is if Donald Trump says something is bad, then it must be good, and vice versa. And since the president has pointed out that this virus started in China, the most plausible explanation for it is Chinese negligence and malevolence, then unfortunately a lot of Democrats have been coming to China's defense, and they'd rather defend the Chinese Communist Party than prove Donald Trump correct. I wish that weren't the case. It wasn't the case for many years. In many cases, Democrats were actually tougher on China than Republicans were over the last 30 years. But it needs to stop now, and we need to go forward in a bipartisan way to hold China accountable and to ensure that America remains the world's preeminent power.
I couldn't agree with you more. Senator, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership on this crucial issue. I couldn't agree with you more that this poses a tremendous national security risk to our entire nation, and I commend you for continuing to speak out so loudly about this.
Thank you, Shawn.
All right.
Well, Shawn, he made some great points specifically about the threat that these students pose to America, and most people don't think about it that way.
No, and I think that you need more Tom Cottons. I mean, the idea that we have 350,000 people, and he pointed this out correctly, a lot of it in the postgraduate and graduate level folks that are coming over here studying, not just studying, but collecting data on our companies and then going back to China to either compete or undermine them. That should be a concern to everybody.
Yeah, it should be.
I think that the idea that this is a partisan issue is ridiculous. This should be something that every single American, no matter where you're from, really, really cares about.
Yeah, they should. And I know some people have criticized him for his comments saying they're racist, but when you really look at the facts, there is point to be concerned, and it should be raised a lot more.
Absolutely. And we're going to dig in a lot deeper to this. Fred Fleitz is coming up. He was the former chief of staff to the National Security Council, and he's going to join us to talk about a lot more of this in terms of the global response as well. So here's a question for you. Why is the United States seemingly alone, though, on an island when blaming China for the origins of COVID-19? What will it take for our allies around the globe to join this fight? We are going to talk about that next. And later, our company is going to join us to discuss the politics behind America's response. How will this crisis help or hurt the president? Also on our show, Scott Adams. You probably know him better as the creator of the comic strip Dilbert. He's been politically outspoken, to say the least, especially about places, and you can guess them, like China. And we're going to get his take and talk about his latest project. That and more when we return.